Das ist Kunst. Der Podcast der Deichtorhallen Hamburg.
It was 1986 and I was in Thule, in Kanak, in a village, and I was waiting to go out with hunters to photograph them hunting on the sea ice, and I was with them for 2-3 weeks usually. There was one little cabin and there was an old man standing outside, always looking up in the air, saying something to me in Greenlandic which I didn't understand. So for 5 days I passed his home and he always said the same thing. So I asked a teacher in the village to translate it, and he said this sentence: "There's something wrong. It shouldn't be like this. The big ice is sick."
Where the World is Melting. Die aktuelle Ausstellung im Foxy, dem temporären Haus der Fotografie der Deichtorhallen Hamburg, zeigt eine Retrospektive des isländischen Fotografen Ragnar Axelsson. Bis zum 18. Juni sind in beeindruckenden Schwarz-weiß-Bildern die arktischen Orte und Lebensräume zu sehen, wo die Welt schmilzt. Schwindende Gletscher und brüchige Eismeere, die außergewöhnlichen Beziehungen zwischen Menschen, Tieren und ihrer arktischen Umwelt stehen im Mittelpunkt der Fotos und des Lebenswerkes von Ragnar Axelsson. Der isländische Fotograf, Jahrgang 1958, verbringt als Kind seine Sommerferien auf einem Bauernhof zwischen den Gletschern Islands und bekommt von seinem Vater Kunstbücher, Fotozeitschriften und eine erste Leica in die Hand gedrückt. Mit dem Auftrag, die isländische Natur zu erkunden und zu dokumentieren. Von 1976 bis 2020 arbeitete Axelsson als Fotojournalist für die isländische Tageszeitung Morgunblaðið. Seine Fotografien wurden außerdem schon in Zeitschriften wie unter anderem der Newsweek, dem Stern, National Geographic oder Time abgedruckt und weltweit ausgestellt. Axelsson hat 7 Bücher in verschiedenen internationalen Ausgaben veröffentlicht, darunter zum Beispiel Arctic Heroes, ein Fotobuch, das den Schlittenhunden Grönlands als Helden der Arktis gewidmet ist. Seit mehr als 40 Jahren fotografiert Axelsson in arktischen Regionen und ausschließlich in Schwarz-weiß. Seine Begeisterung für die Kraft der Elemente und die nordische Natur drückt sich in beeindruckenden fotografischen Landschaftsporträts von Eis, Gletschern, Bergen und Fjorden aus. Er reist immer wieder in die abgelegensten und isoliertesten Regionen. Zu Inuit-Jägern nach Nordkanada und Grönland, zu Bauern und Fischern auf Island und den Färöerinseln und zur indigenen Bevölkerung in Nordskandinavien und Sibirien. Axelsson dokumentiert seine Expeditionen und den manchmal beschwerlichen Alltag in Kälte, Eis und Sturm, den er mit den Menschen vor Ort teilt. Durch diese Nähe und die Beständigkeit seiner Besuche sind diese Menschen oft zu FreundInnen Axelssons geworden. Er versteht sich als Botschafter, schafft Momentaufnahmen und dokumentiert die Erzählungen dieser Menschen, deren Lebensgrundlagen und Bedingungen teilweise am Verschwinden sind oder vor allem durch den Klimawandel immer größeren Veränderungen gegenüberstehen. Er will ihren Stimmen Gehör verschaffen. Ich habe mit Ragnar Axelsson über seine fotografischen Anfänge in der isländischen Natur, über Schlittenhunde und über seine Expeditionen gesprochen, die ihn immer wieder dorthin führen, wo Lebensräume jetzt schon akut gefährdet sind. Das Gespräch wurde auf Englisch geführt. The title of the exhibition is Where the World is Melting, and that's also the title of your book.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, like, if you could say where and in what ways have you witnessed the world melting? Like, where have you witnessed, like, firsthand climate change?
I've been traveling all over the Arctic countries, and I'm working on a bigger project. It's a part of the bigger project about all 8 Arctic countries, so it's taking in. And on the way we make books, like I did Glacier and I did Faces of the North and Arctic Heroes, Last Days of the Arctic. So there's a few books that's just been steps on the way to the big one. And during all this time, for years, I've seen how it was because you could see in some of the places I went to, like if you take Greenland, And also the glaciers in Iceland, I grew up underneath them, and I saw them shrink and retreat. So, but they have been bigger, they have been smaller before, and our planet is in the phase of this is happening. I leave it to scientists to tell us if we are the one to blame, but it is also natural causes in some ways. And so I have seen it. I've seen difference between years, how the glaciers retreat, and also the sea ice in Greenland. That's where it used to be safe when I went with the hunters on the sea ice. It was pretty thick, and 20 years, 30 years later, you sail on a boat where you used to travel by dog sled.
Yeah. I found a quote of yours, or a quote that you heard years and years ago, really interesting, and I think you said it was back in the mid-'80s already, or was it mid-'90s, that you heard a Greenlandic hunter say that the ice is sick.
Yeah.
So that was a long time ago.
It was 1986, and I was in Thule, in Kanak, in a village, and I was waiting to go out with hunters to photograph them hunting on the sea ice, and I was with them for 2-3 weeks usually. And we were waiting because the weather wasn't good enough, so I was just outside walking and photographing in the village. And there was one little cabin, and there was an old man standing outside, always looking up in the air, saying something to me in Greenlandic, which I didn't understand. So for 5 days I passed his home, and he always said the same thing. So I asked someone, a teacher in the village, to translate it, and he said this sentence: "There's something wrong. It shouldn't be like this. The big ice is sick." He was talking about the ice cap, the Greenlandic glacier. So he has, sensed how it was. It was in his fingers and toes. He knew it,
Yeah.
And I felt like they knew it more than everybody else, before.
A lot earlier.
Even scientists knew what's happening, but it wasn't a big issue at the time in the world. And when you saw that, you start to think about it and photograph it differently, and documenting it and thinking ahead, like 50 years, what will it be like? So, but I never thought it would be that drastic as it is.
Let's go back to where you personally started. You are from and you grew up in Iceland, and your family was very connected to the outdoors, but also to science, and your father played an important role for you picking up the camera.
Yeah. Well, I was it was a tradition in Iceland to send kids to farms in the summer to kind of try to make people a man. You know what I mean? And it was an isolated farm. You had to fly. I had to be flown in because there were glacial rivers that were no bridges, and hardly any people came. So, and I was staying with 5 brothers and 2 sisters, and they were all scientists and scientific thinking. They were collecting insects and flowers and birds, and they were measuring the glaciers and the glacial rivers. And that was my job as a kid, to pass a 10-year-old on a horseback riding, on a horse over the raging rivers sometimes. They were always doing those research work, and I saw what was happening then. But I thought it would just come and go, but it was a start of something much bigger.
Yeah. I think it was your father that gave you your first camera, and you had a dark room at home, and you got a lot of art books from your father. How did you get into all these things?
That was, he gave me all kinds of, I got his Leica borrowed when I was a kid, and said, you have to take care of it. This is a very expensive camera, and take photographs, because he gave me, and my parents gave me art books and painted by painters, and he bought magazines. We had to buy it and get it sent. Took a month, to get Stern, Life, whatever. And I was watching all those great photographers at the time, and looking at the painters. So it was. I wanted to paint or draw. I couldn't do that. So I had
did you try?
I tried. It's terrible. You would laugh. But so my pencil was my camera. And I started documenting life. I was starting very early on, when I was 10 years old, taking pictures of the people and thinking they will be gone one day, like all of us. And so I photographed them, like seal hunting and doing their farm work and measuring the glaciers. So I photographed them, documented that.
So you remember, as a kid, you already had those thoughts. I think I have to document.
I already had those thoughts then. Just for fun to have, because when you look at the painters, and it makes you think about the old painters in the 16th, 17th century. They were documentary painters.
That's
painting.
all they had.
Yeah. So it was, you wouldn't even know how people were dressed or something like that, and how it was on the field. So it was the same. I was looking at my photographs as a painting. What will it be like? It will be remembered maybe in 100 years, 200 years, and it might be something.
Yeah. And other Arctic explorers inspired you too to go exactly there?
Yeah, I read the stories about the great explorers like Knut Rasmussen and Peter Freuchen, and they went together on the same trips and wrote books about it. And one was writing very kind of boring text. It was like you fell asleep reading it. The other one was so funny. He was putting all the moments in his stories, and that was something that I liked. So the same thing when I photograph. I try to get the funny moment and write down the stories with the hunters and add something to the photograph and brings it to life, and also gives them a voice for the world to see how their world is.
Just one question concerning your work that you did for years and years. You worked for media, for newspapers, for the Icelandic newspaper Morgunblaðið and other news media. I was wondering, is that something that kind of enabled you to do your own projects, even like financially? Was that something that you had a stable income, and then from there you could start to do your own work?
Yeah, I had to. That was what I had to do. I had to work and then to go for my private projects actually, and I had to work a lot to go there. And sometimes I was so excited going that once I sold my car, I sold my cameras just to go with few cameras, and I had to buy everything back. So it was. I felt like it has to be done, but there was no belief in it at the time. And nobody, people said when I went there, why are you going there over and over again? It's just ice. But it made me even more stubborn. I mean, thinking about, you don't know what's happening. So, yeah, I spent a lot on it. And then I had to quit the paper just to finish the big book, because there was not a chance of being able to work. There was no understanding at all in how important it is to document it. Yeah.
Your work with the inhabitants of the Arctic regions, also with sheep farmers and indigenous people, it's done with a lot of social conscience and a lot of empathy towards the people and the places that you photograph. And I was wondering, in cultural anthropology, that's actually a method, that's like the main method, like this participating observation and being immersed in a social context of the people where you take photographs and where you want to learn more about their lives. Is that something that you consciously chose to do? Did you learn that somewhere? Did you have any contact with anthropologists, or is that something that just came kind of naturally to you?
It came kind of naturally. Also, you met people and you learned a lot from. I usually talk to. I have always looking up to people with knowledge and elderly people. I ask them, learn from them, and I think it's when I was photographing what I was doing and photographing the farmers and all that. I had the feeling that I became their friends actually. Or the friend, and they became mine, and I go over and over again to them, and sometimes I didn't take pictures in the beginning, and then they got to know me, and then they trusted me, and then I could photograph whatever I wanted to do, and photograph them off guard, as life just happens, and you freeze a moment in someone's life that will live forever. Yeah, and you never know when a photograph becomes a legendary photograph. It might take 50 years, 100 years, maybe it will never do so, but there are a few photographs in the world that has kind of changed the world or attitude of people.
Do you remember your very first excursion for your very first own project? And how did you make the acquaintances that got you to do your first own excursion?
It was actually, I thought when I photographed the farmers seal hunting when I was 10, I thought it was something... This will be gone in 50 years. I promised them not to show those photographs until they were gone, because seal hunting was not very popular at the time. So it stopped. And there was a certain photograph of an old man in a boat with his dog that kind of was like something standing behind me saying, picking in your back, saying, this is something you have to do. And it was the story of the old man sitting in his boat with his dog, and he was telling me the story of the shark that he found dead in the surface of the ocean, and he put a rope around his tail and rowed ashore, tied his boat to the pier, and then the moment that clicked was he was closing his eyes and touching his cap and saying, He woke up and he wasn't dead. I haven't seen the other half of my boat since then. It took it apart. Whether it was, I was like laughing, and whether it was true or not, it's probably a lie. He was kind of like Munchausen stories, and just checking on me. And that moment was a decisive moment as a photograph. And from that moment, I thought, this is something you have to do.
Yeah, you already said that a central motivation for doing that kind of work is to give those kind of people and also their perspectives a voice.
Yeah.
And what would you say can we learn from those perspectives? What can we learn from those people living so close to nature?
I think we can learn a lot. They are walking on the pages in a book, with the book we are reading about, and they have a lot of knowledge, and they're just doing what they have to do to survive. And it's a beautiful life, it's a hard life, and they have skills and knowledge that's, we wouldn't, like in Greenland, when you're with them on the sea ice, most people wouldn't survive what they survive.
What I think is really interesting is that where you talked about heroes, the Arctic heroes, your book, and also a part in the exhibition, animals are portrayed by you as protagonists. There's the sled dogs in Greenland, and if you compare that to animals here in Central Europe, they're either mostly seen as pets or as commodity. And that is very different in those places where you took a lot of pictures, and the animals are really in the center. You portray them as protagonists. Hunting is not a sport in Greenland. It's a way of life. It's like ingrained in people's everyday lives. When did that happen? When did you realize I want to do more with these animals because they play such an important role?
They do, and they're working machines, and without them there wouldn't be any Inuits. It's I think one of the oldest dog breeds in the world, and it has kept them alive. And I've been there quite often, so you look at a dog as a dog and don't pay much attention to it. That kind of, you see a beautiful dog and it's like a beautiful dog, you clap it and you go away. But I realized when I heard a few stories from hunters, beautiful stories about their dogs, and so I started thinking about it and started photographing the dogs as humans, if they were humans and could talk, because the stories they told me was so beautiful. It's just a film.
Yeah.
About
There's this one special dog that you portrayed, right? What was his name again?
Kandu.
Kandu, yeah.
Black dog.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful story, and it's a story that I had I called my friend Ole, and lived in Skorpsund, and like 6 months before I came, or something like that. And I want to come and I want to get some stories from you. I know you have them. And he said, yeah, you're welcome as always. And when I came, he didn't want to tell me the stories. There was a journalist that came there from, I don't know where he was from, and he put a pearl recorder on the table, and he was angry. He said, I can't talk to a pearl recorder. So he didn't tell any stories. And when I came, he was kind of still angry a bit and didn't want to tell me any stories, even though we were great friends. And he thought that the world didn't show them enough respect. And I told him, I respect you, you know that. And otherwise I would not come here and photograph. And he said, I know. But then I asked him, could you write those stories down for the world to know in the future? And he said, it's going with me to the grave. And I just write it for your kids or ancestors, that to have it, to show how big man you are. And he said, I'll think about it. And the next morning he came to me and said, I'm going to tell you a story. And he told me a story about Kandu, a black dog, and he was not a good hunter when he was young. His father broke his kayak. He didn't want to teach him to row, and he broke it and said, you have to learn it yourself. So he was angry at his grandfather, and he was angry, and he was going out hunting, wanting to be a hunter, and he was not hunting anything. And there was an old man in the village that was watching him, and he said, you have to change your attitude. Your attitude is so negative, you're in the biggest art gallery in the world, and it's all yours. Those sculptures and those mountains, and it's really beautiful. You have to change your mind. And I'm going to give you a little puppy. And it's a black dog. And he saw, they looked at each other in the eye for the first time, and the little dog, tilted his head back and forth, and his ears back and forth. And it was like a love story,
That's where he got his positive energy.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were good friends. They were always together on the sea ice for 6 years, and I think 5-6 years. And he was not the best sled dog, but everybody in the team liked him. If you're not pulling, the dogs will hate you. So it was like they're fighting.
Yeah.
And Kento was always loved mingling, and always when he was traveling, he was the first one to sense if there was something like a polar bear or some danger or whatever. Then he looked back and they talked together with their eyes and ears. So to make a long story short, and that when they were, and the old hunter went with him once. They were hunting, and Kento crossed the line of the other sled dog, the old man's sled dog, when they were stopping to watch over the sea ice whether there were polar bears or something. And Ole said to Kento, you're only a stupid dog does that. You're not a stupid dog. I'll ask a polar bear to bite you if you do that again.
Oh. And
then the old man came and said, you have to be careful in nature. You can't. Nature senses what you're saying. Mother Nature is watching over you, and you can't say it. It can hit you in the back. Ole wasn't thinking about it at all. And when they a month later they were on the sea ice, and Kento saw polar bear tracks, and so they cut half of the dogs from each sled dog, and they ran away and followed the polar bear. And when they came and passing an iceberg, they saw a very big polar bear with 10-15 dogs hanging on its back, and he was punching them off one by one, killing them. And Ole saw Kento hanging on his back and was afraid of shooting him because he might hit the dog. So he was watching, terrified, and suddenly the polar bear hit Kento, and he flew up in the air and landed on the ice. And Ole was so angry he shot the polar bear when he saw that. And he came and he could hear Kento calling him. And he came to where he was lying on his back. He was lying, licking snow, and his back feet, the hind legs, were turning upwards. He had broken his spine. So it was over for him, and Ole knew that. And Kento looked him in the eye like he did for the first time, and licked his face, and licked his hand, and looked him in the eye, closed them, and put his head on his hand. Ole knew it was over, and asked the old hunter, you have to take him down, it's over for him. I can't do it, he's my best friend. And the old hunter said, do you remember what I said to you a month ago? And he said, yeah, I know now.
Oh, wow.
And that's a beautiful story.
That's a beautiful story, but also intense, yeah.
Yeah, and when Ole had finished that story, he said, he started to cry.
Yeah.
He missed him so much. And I'll tell you more stories when you come next time. But there was no next time. He passed away 3 months later. And I had promised him to honor him and his stories in a book. So it was something that I had to do. I got other stories from other people. It was difficult to get. But I think it's something that I felt like I had to do as paying back for their hospitality and allow me to photograph their life.
And it's a great story about loyalty and respect for nature in itself.
It is, yeah. And he always told me, when you go out on the sea ice, he said once, are you afraid? No, I was like playing James Bond or somebody. But I see it in your eyes. Well, don't know where I'm going, what I'm going to do. Well, he said, you have to change your mind. That was it. He was teaching me like he had been taught by the old hunter. Yeah. It's going to be your greatest journey if you're positive and you're looking forward to. It's going to be great. But if you have bad attitude and all that, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be your worst. So I always go happy, go lucky on everything. Yeah. I'm careful, but sometimes we have troubles with the weather and cracks in the sea ice and thinning ice and all that. But we are very careful, actually, try to be. But you go with a positive mind, and it's great trips, actually.
I wanted to talk to you about going on excursions, and specifically, I heard you saying that one of your ways to get prepared is to just jump in the water every day once for a couple minutes, and no matter how cold it is.
Yeah.
That's one of the ways you get prepared. And I was also wondering, like, technically, what do you need to bring to an environment if you're going to stay there for like 2 weeks or so? How many layers of clothing do you have on, or what kind of, is it really special clothing? Like, what do you actually bring there?
I bring extremely warm clothes and like three layers, 3 or 4 layers actually. Sometimes when it's very cold, and something, always have like something to change if you fall in the ocean. But I trained for the trips. Like I played football and running, and then I went swimming in the ocean every day for 3 years. I stopped a bit. It's going less now since the pandemic, but you go in cold water, hot water, and it cures everything. I think it makes you positive, but that's part of the training. But it's also when you're there, you can't make mistakes. You have to be very careful with your clothing and gloves.
Yeah. Once you took off your gloves, because obviously it's hard to press a camera shutter with those big gloves on.
Yeah, it was like nothing happened with that, so I had to take them off because the moments was so good. The light was beautiful, and the hunter was looking for tracks, and he was just not thinking about me, so I had to take them off. And I was for 10 minutes without the outer gloves. I had the inner, thinner gloves on, but my fingers froze. And I felt like nothing was working. My fingers was like, what's happening? And I took the gloves, they were all white. And they turned out later to be black. And my thumb is still hurting a lot.
So that's a question of 10 minutes. That can happen.
It took only 10 minutes. It was minus 48 degrees in with the wind chill. And it's terribly dangerous. And there was a hunter that fell in a crack in a similar few weeks before that I was there. And they had to take his hand off. So this is something, it's a tough life, and you're not allowed to make mistakes. It's like a little bit, probably like going to the moon. I mean, you have to be careful.
There. Emotionally, on excursions, you've said that you're kind of addicted, even though sometimes you sit there and you're freezing and you think like, oh, I just want to get out of here. But then when you go home, like after a week, you feel a pull, something that pulls you back. So it's kind of an addiction. If I that's what it sounds like. It
is. It's very strange. You know, sometimes when it's very cold and you get back home to safety in the cabin or a tent, and you say, oh, that's it. Now I'm finished. Now I'm not coming back. That's enough. But it takes you only a week to go back, wanting to go back. It's like a magnet, or I don't know what it is. It's like somebody's calling you. You have to come back. It's really, maybe it's nature itself. Because when you, like when you're on the sea ice, you lie on your back, it's pitch black, and you see all the stars, like billions of stars, and you start to think, we can't be alone. It's impossible. And and you can hear the ice like rumbling, and you start to think about life on Earth in a different way.
You've also mentioned that you can only stay in a place like that for a certain amount of time because you're surrounded by ice. You're kind of in an ice desert. And what does that do with you? I mean, like every morning when you wake up, you pretty much see the same thing, even though it's shifting and changing. How is that emotionally on you?
It's actually fine in a way. It's like it makes you very relaxed in a way. But on the other hand, when you've been for too long, you don't know if there's anybody alive on the planet. You have no info.
You're cut off.
You're cut off. Yeah, and that's really. But it's like a meditation though, in a way, and. It attaches you more and more to nature itself. And most of those waiting and being such a long, you're waiting for a moment to catch, and you always have to be on alert for that moment. And my teacher and friend Mary Ellen Mark, one of the greatest photographers on the planet, she passed away in 2015. She was the one who said you can never stop, just continue taking photographs. When you want to stop, I thinking you had the picture. So sometimes you have to be that long to get a moment, and you in a long journey, maybe 2-3 weeks, you get maybe 2 photographs. So it's ticking in like that.
At what point did you decide to do black and white photography? It's definitely important, I assume, in terms of like documenting the essentials of those areas where you go in the Arctic regions. There's a lot of shades of white and gray anyway around in that kind of landscape. Yeah. But do you remember what made you choose to do black and white photography?
I thought the magic moment when you see a photograph come up in a developer, it's like coming slowly. It was this magic moment that it got stuck in my heart. And you print in a darkroom, burn and dots, and you kind of made the atmosphere in the photograph. We have so much color, and there are great color photographers, but black and white to me is much stronger in a way, and it kind of shouts at you, it pops at you.
The first picture that we see when we enter the exhibition at Foxy is a glacier in Iceland, and the black and white, the photography, it actually kind of mirrors the colors that are already there. I mean, it's almost, this photograph is almost like black and white. That day everything was grey, so if you take it in color, it would look pretty much the same.
It would be pretty much the same, but it's not as strong though. That's the thing. And if you see together a color one and black and white, then you would just pop to the black and white one.
I want to just talk real briefly about your one breakthrough signature shot. You've referred to it as your kind of hit single picture, your Yesterday, like Yesterday by the Beatles. Yeah. Who is that, and who's on that picture, and where was that taken?
It was taken in 1995, and it's my friend Guðjón. I met him first when there was a storm and the electricity went out on a lot of farms, and I heard that they had to hand milk the cows because the machines didn't work. So I knocked on his door, and he came out like a ghost. What do you want? So he was not very friendly, but he is friendly. It's just like how he was playing. And I told him who I was, and I wanted to get a photograph of him when they were hand milking the cows. And so he allowed me to do that, and it ran in the paper, and they were kind of dirty, and they were taken away from him. And I was really angry seeing that, so I went back to him and said, "Can I buy you new cows? I'm so sorry." And he said, "I was quitting anyway. I didn't mind not having to milk them anymore." And we became very good friends, and I followed him on the beach where he was looking for a mink that was killing his other ducks. So I came there a few times and photographed not much, and then this moment was it was everything, the mood in the air, and the waves were big. I was waiting for the waves to hit the rock, and he was like being himself, and then he looked up like he was seeing the mink, and he was looking and that was the moment.
Did you feel that in that moment? Did you expect it to go? Nowadays you would say it went viral, kind of.
I think I felt like something happened. Yeah. I wasn't sure. I was very excited going back, and it was on film. So I went back developing the film. I was really happy. Yeah, I got it. So that was the moment. And I went quite often to meet him. I never tried to. I took more pictures of him, but this was the photograph actually. Yeah. It was Yesterday. Yeah. And when I'm asked for photographs, it's usually this one about my photography, and it's. If you write Yesterday as a song, you would like to write Let It Be or Hey Jude or Here Comes the Sun. You have to continue, and that was.
You don't want to try to recreate that.
No, you don't.
Other people can do that. Yeah, they can do cover versions.
Yeah, but that picture made him kind of famous too, and I was really happy with that. He got a role in 3 films and 4 advertisements, something like that. So because of his face and his beard and all that, and I was really happy.
So it was mutual benefit.
It was mutual benefit, and we became very good friends. And when one of the film companies called me, because he told them to call me, and they said, "Please just pay him like you pay the others, not try to, And they paid him, and then he called me and said, "I have money for you." "Oh, really? Why?" "They paid me so much money." "Well, it's your money. It's not my money. It's your money."
Oh, so modest.
Yeah, he was so nice, and we became very good friends. And in the end, before he died, he had cancer, and he was alone. And I came to visit him, and I bought him food, and he didn't eat much in the end, but he always did when I came. So I really like the man, and most of the people I photograph, I try to find out where they are, and if I see them, and keep contact, and yeah.
About climate change awareness, and maybe also a bit about the protests that we have today. They face a lot of repression and a lot of harsh criticism for the civil disobedience and their activism. And I was wondering, do you kind of hear about these things? Like the current coverage and the attention for climate change protests, movements, has that had any impact on you personally, or maybe even for your work?
No, not really. I mean, if they feel bad, I think it's dangerous to make people afraid of. This is something we have to solve. Scientists must tell us what is happening. I'm documenting life that is changing and going down to open people's eyes for it. But I kind of follow them and see what their worries about. But sometimes I always say to my friend hunters who are worried because they don't see the light by the end of the tunnel, that's probably part of it, the protest, that they're afraid. But I was afraid when I was young of nuclear war. We were told that we will disappear of the planet. And when I tell my friends in the Inuits that there's always light by the end of the tunnel, you have to be positive, and we hope that we will solve this. The Earth is in the phase of warming up. There's no doubt about that. And for me, photographing I get hit on a lot by doing what I'm doing. From people saying there's nothing nothing happening. But I have been walking on the pages and seen it happen. So I know it is. It would be extremely stupid to ignore that we are, at least we should be worried. But I think we have to do it in a, I think everybody is, most people are aware of it and thinking about it.
Yeah. Would you say that your role as a photographer is definitely, you see it in documenting and showing and bringing those pictures into, Central Europe, for example, where we don't see those pictures very often. We don't actually ever see those kind of pictures. No,
I had the feeling early on when I was talking to them that, and I was with a friend of mine, Hunter, on the sea ice, and he caught a polar bear, and I photographed it, and I told him, I have pictures that might harm you if I show them, because it's the king of the ice falling. And there was a silence for 1 minute, the longest minute I ever lived, I think, because I didn't want to throw them actually away, but I would have done it. And he said, no, I want you to show the world how my life is. It's thousands of years of tradition, and I have to feed my family. I can't go shopping like you can. And if you eat a cow, then you should look, want to throw stones at me, then you have to think first. Yeah. So he gave me permission to use it, and we will use it in the big book. And so I wanted to give them a voice with my photographs and starting writing down their stories for the world to know the different, because I've been to a lot of Arctic conferences and listening to speeches, and most of them go through one ear out the other. And I think the sentences that I've already got and what I'm writing down in that next book they will live longer in a book and in an exhibition traveling than all the words or all the speeches that I've heard. Because they have wise words to say as warning. I was supposed to go to Siberia before the war, and war broke out, so I went to Greenland instead. And with my friend Hjalmar, Hunter, we went over the mountains. There was a storm, and we were going to pick up a guy who was the last man standing in the village. There used to be 80 people. When I came there first, some 30 years ago, there were 40 people in the village, and he was the last man. He had 20 brothers, sisters. There were 2 of them left. And he was terrified of ghosts or little hidden people that he saw. He was getting crazy of the loneliness. So we were going to get him, and he was going to a hospital, not coming back. And when he looked back for the last time, I photographed him in his eyes. I saw the frightness in his eyes and sadness. And he looked back and said, "There's no hope in Cape Hope anymore." Mm-hmm. So those sentences will live in a book much longer than, and they are stronger than, and it was beautiful what he said. And the stories of the ghost, I asked a woman in another village, "Do you believe his stories?" And she said, "No, we laughed at him." But then he showed us little tiny boots that was found on his loft in his house, and nobody here knows how to make them. So where did they come from? So they started not at least laughing at him. But it's those kind of little stories that I write down, and that's where you have to have that moment at the right time, decisive moment, a moment you freeze in time that will live forever. Moments of life that's slowly disappearing. And that's faster. Something to open people's eyes for. Yeah. There is life there. It's beautiful life, and there's good people, but it's a hard life. The highest suicide rate is in Greenland in the world. And the young kids are committing suicide because they're worried and afraid. That's not, in my mind, right. You have to have all of us to have a chance. Everyone needs to get a perspective, especially when their means of living are being taken away slowly. Yeah, it's very important. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Das war eine neue Folge von Das ist Kunst, dem Podcast der Deichtorhallen Hamburg in Zusammenarbeit mit Byte FM. Zum Schluss habe ich noch einen Veranstaltungstipp für euch. Am 24. Mai ist Ragnar Axelsson im Foxy zu Gast und diskutiert mit der Meeresbiologin Prof. Dr. Antje Bötius über die drastischen Folgen des Klimawandels für die arktischen Gebiete der Erde und die Rolle der Fotografie. Mehr Infos zu der Diskussionsveranstaltung findet ihr unter www.deichtorhallen.de. Mehr Infos zu Ragnar Axelsson und der Ausstellung im Foxy findet ihr auch in den Shownotes dieser Folge. Wenn euch der Podcast gefällt, dann hinterlasst uns doch gerne eine Bewertung oder empfehlt ihn gleich weiter. Ihr könnt uns auch gerne schreiben, und zwar an dasistkunst@deichtorhallen.de. Wir freuen uns über euer Feedback. Ich bin Friederike Herr und sage Tschüss, wenn ihr mögt, bis zum nächsten Mal.